Good afternoon and welcome to yet another segment of The Download here on 91.7 FM. I'm Chris May, here along with my munificent co-host and veteran radio personality here in the desert, Miss Ellie Tourget. Ellie.
Hey, Chris, I just love it. I love it when you introduce me. You always have something great to say.
Munificent. Now, that's not to be confused with the word magnificent. Do you know what... Most people don't know what the word munificent actually means.
I'll let you explain that to our listeners today.
Well, actually, I want to ask you, if you would agree that you are munificent, that would help me out greatly, because the definition is to be overly generous, and normally where there's money involved. So
you're asking me to take you to lunch after this, or dinner,
Hey,
huh?
It was your idea, not mine. I love that. But yeah, here we are, another week on the air, and just having fun.
Yeah, we have a great show lined up today. It's going to blow your socks off.
So let's, just so we can get into our interview portion of the show, let's just buzz through real quick our What's Trending section. What do you got?
Well, I know that like you may have received everything. Like you don't want a gift from somebody that because you already have everything, but maybe perhaps you don't have any moon rocks in your possession.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
but
sure.
Now you can buy a piece of a moon rock.
Really?
Yeah, it's like less than $100, like $99.99 for
something online.
You can buy it. You don't have to buy it online. You can actually purchase it with with cash. You can buy it online.
But where do you buy them?
Yeah, you'd have to look it up online where to buy them.
Probably.
Like, it's not like there's like a guy on the corner and like Moonrock's store.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, but it's really a small amount, like a milligram.
My dad always told me the fun story in science class in high school about how they had brought back a piece of the moon and how thrilled he was that he got to touch that. It's so funny that the technology has become what it's become, that now we actually have enough of that at our disposal that we can sell that and trade it, and it's fascinating. It's really kind of interesting.
It is, or you could go out into the desert somewhere and probably find some moon rock or something that.
Well, hopefully these aren't knockoff moon rocks.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe that's where they got these things. That kind of scares me a little bit.
I thought the gift, for someone who has everything. Also, what's interesting is that the new iPhones come out. There's been some tweaks and some changes to it. The new operating system, the iOS 7. Some people have downloaded that. Some people are waiting a couple of months into the process to make sure that all the bugs are fixed. I found out that just this new phone that has a sensor, a fingerprint sensor, which I don't know if that's such a great idea because, unless you're a criminal, it's a great idea because then they can find you wherever you are.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. But a cat paws can unlock that.
Wow. So keep the phone away from your cat.
Why would someone take the cat and say, here, try and unlock my phone, and the cat can unlock it?
They do have little fingerprints, though. Have you ever seen their little paws up close? It's kind of fascinating. I don't know. Well, anyway, great story. Hey, hey, I got to tell you, sleep texting has become kind of this like growing trend. Do you know that?
Sleep texting?
People
it's
are
like sleepwalking?
It's like a total nightmare, really. It's seriously, there are people that are updating, that are texting, people that are like texting social media addicts are doing it in their sleep and have no idea what it is that they're actually doing.
You got to be kidding me.
They're trying to determine whether or not this is becoming
I don't believe it.
I'm telling you.
Texting in your sleep.
It's out there. I think if you look it up on online, there's probably some information about that. I've heard about that, but I'm seeing it pop up more and more. On some of the social networks and stuff, stories about this ongoing phenomenon.
I believe that people that are really into texting, like are texting constantly, I believe that would be true because, it's just something you're naturally always doing. You're used to being interrupted and, so I can see that happening.
It kind of becomes wired into your brain. And one last thing, speaking of munificent and giving money generously, there were a couple of guys on YouTube real recently, Stuart Edge and Andrew Hale. There were these YouTube personalities. You have these people that like to kind of pop up online and kind of make a name and for themselves. Anyway, what they were doing is going around from diner to diner in a little town in Utah and filming this, by the way. Actually going up to order a meal and would ask the waitress at the end of the meal, hey, what is the largest tip you've ever received? And then would give them $200 and then tape their reaction.
I saw that. That's amazing.
And didn't take the money back. This was actually something that
they just gave the money away to people that they felt like were really good, stewards or something, or waitresses, or
I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting. But that's an awfully munificent thing to do. To just randomly give $200 to one person, let alone several.
Right. I think it's great. If you can do it, do it.
I think that's cool. Well, moving on to our interview, today in studio on The Download is perhaps one of the music industry's most well-known drummers and studio musicians. Having played on over 5,000 records, film scores, and television jingles, many of you would be surprised to learn the impact that musicians had behind the scenes in shaping the music culture. What many folks were not aware of was that in Hollywood in the 60s and the 70s, records were being cut almost daily. And there was a group of around 20 musicians or so who brought to life artists that we have all heard of. And today, one of the group's most influential members who helped shape the 60s, 70s, and 80s through his drumming joins us. Take a listen.
In hour number one tonight, the great drummer Hal Blaine will be with us.
There's Ringo Starr, Phil Collins, and Hal Blaine. Hal who?
This week, we have a very special artist profile of a man whose name you probably don't even recognize, but whose drum work you certainly do. His name is Hal Blaine.
But I can't help falling in love with you. Two girls for every boy. Like a bridge over troubled water. Monday, so good to me.
Sharing horizons that are new to us, watching the signs along the way. Wouldn't it be
Today, it gives us great pleasure to welcome the legendary drummer Hal Blaine to our show. Hal, how are you?
Just fine, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here, especially so close to my home.
Yes.
Yeah, you do live here in Palm Desert, California.
I live in Palm Desert, yeah.
Now, are you here year round or
Year round.
really?
You like that heat. You're the heat person.
You know, when you get to be my age, that Greek guy sneaks in on you, that arthritis.
You playing the drums for so many years and being a drummer and a musician, playing other instruments as well, I'm sure the impact on your joints has been tremendous over time.
I got to be honest with you, I never had that problem because I was never a Buddy Rich type soloist or Gene Krupa type soloist. I used to call myself a method drummer because all I wanted to do was know what the song was and listen to the song, and then I felt the impetus of what I was going to play on this record. And I've said before many times, what is a record?
What is a record?
Or what is a song? A song is a story. You know, and you have to know the story. And when I worked as an actor, I worked with some fine actors, and they were method actors. And so they wanted to know what reason they had for this particular scene, because all are called in to do one scene maybe. And what's my motivation? I mean, you come off the street and they say, I'm going to run down to the corner. Well, that's fine. But why am I running down to the corner? Mm-hmm. Am I being chased? Am I out of breath? There's a million things involved. So I started calling myself a method drummer.
Because you took the time to see what that particular song was all about, to hear it, and then to feel what the musicians or the singer or the artist was trying to do. And so that's a
and
good
I
thing.
quickly learned as a youngster that when you played jazz, that you'd never make an occupation out of it because there was just absolutely no money in jazz. And one of the great stories is about Miles Davis, the great trumpet player, jazz trumpet player. He was in the middle of an interview, sort of like we're talking now, and the interviewer asked Miles, what was it that led you to the jazz field? And Miles Davis said, I hated crowds.
So he figured he would avoid that. Well, where were you born and raised? I mean, I know you've settled here in the desert, but...
I was born in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And at about the age 7, we moved to Hartford, Connecticut. And I went to Weaver High School in Hartford, Connecticut, and kind of grew up in Hartford. And then when I was about 14, I moved to California with my mom and dad. My sisters and my brother had married and gone off their own separate ways. I was the baby of the family, the spoiled brat, I guess. But it was a time that I lived very close in Hartford, Connecticut. My father was a shoemaker. He was a shoemaker, and he worked at the Connecticut Leather Company, which was right across the street from the State Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. The State Theater was one of the most well-known on the circuit of all the vaudevillians, the big bands, the movies. My dad would take me. I'd get my dime, 15 cents, Saturday morning. We would take the trolley, because he worked right across the street from the State Theater, and I would go in there and sit from probably 8 in the morning till he got off work at night, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. He worked all day. And I would see I saw every band, every Frank Sinatra, every Sinatra-type singers, the Dick Hameses, all the great singers of that era. And, of course, I got to hear all the great music and really got hooked on drums. And I've told this when I do my clinics. I've talked to drummers about that. Have you ever been watching a group live and then you thought, boy, I know this song backwards. If that drummer has a heart attack and falls over, I can jump right up there. I can jump right up there. And they have all said the same thing. They've all felt that.
Well, now, so you had that influence of the theater right across from your father's work, and so. But as far as musicians, what were your earliest influences of what made you decide? Well, I'm gonna be a drummer, or who was it that brought you around, or made you feel like this is what I want to do one day?
You know, my sister, God bless her, was married to a great trumpet player of that era. His name was Wee Willie Fields. His name was Saul Feldman, but that was his stage name. And I remember on Saturdays, I'd see him, he was in a tuxedo, going to play a job. And it just knocked me out the way he looked, he just looked wonderful. And he was a wonderful man, and he knew that I had a little interest in drums, and he would talk to me about music. And that, of course, certainly put me in a direction. And then, of course, seeing all these big bands and seeing all the great drummers and the dancers and the singers and being a romanticist, a sentimentalist, I just got hooked. I just wanted to play my drums. And so when I was about 13-ish, I guess, my sister Marcia, God bless her, bought me my first little set of drums. She was a secretary at some place, whatever. And she bought me a set of drums for $52. And she was paying that little set of drums off $1 a week when she would get her salary. And so those little drums, it just consisted of a little snare drum, a bass drum, one cymbal. That was the set of drums.
Wow. My, how things have changed a little, huh?
Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Yeah.
Did you have any musical influences in your family? I mean, your folks or anything like that?
No, nobody played music in my family, but my father did have a violin that he had somehow brought from when he was a child from the old country, and it sat in its case for a million years. My parents had said at the time, you should play the violin. We have a violin. I was not a violin person, But that violin, there's a young man out there, I wish I could remember his name now. He's become one of the top violinists / fiddlers. He's a very big country guy. And I heard about him. This was a young child. He was about 9 years old, 8 years old. And he loved playing the violin. They couldn't afford a violin. And so I remember that I took my dad's violin after he'd passed on. I took it down to the guy in Hollywood on Vine. Right down the street from the drum shop is a place, it's still there, it's called Stein on Vine.
Stein on
Yeah,
Vine.
I've seen it.
And he did violins.
Okay.
And I took this violin, he made it like brand new. And I donated it to this young child. I remember we did it at the Union. They took pictures. I've got pictures of it somewhere.
And he's still
Gabriel Witcher.
Gabriel Witcher.
Yeah. He's become one of the top studio violinists, and also in the country field, he's become a major fiddler.
Well, you've had major influence on us in the music that we've listened to. Let's fast forward to the time when you got into the studio and you walked in one day. No, so tell us what that was like. Tell me what it was like in those days when you first started making recordings, and how did you get to that point, and what happened after that?
Well, fortunately, I had auditioned for Rocky Cole, who was a conductor for Patti Page. And he liked the way I played. It was all big band stuff, Patti's, all of her arrangements. And I went on the road with Patti Page, who we lost recently. Wonderful, wonderful lady. And she was selling the doggy in the window. How much is that dog in the window? Anyway, I got had an awful lot of basic training with Rocky Cole. You know, everybody changes their name. Rocky Coluccio changed his name to Rocky Cole.
That was cool back then. My dad never used his real name too. It was Perillo, and he changed it to Perry.
Well, there you are. There you are.
I guess it's just easier to remember.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably more easily billable. I don't know.
No, the story was always that it looked better on the marquee.
Mm.
So if you were going to become a star, you had to have a name that
Sound
clicked.
like star, yeah.
That clicked. I know that the late 50s, and I started recording with a gentleman by the name of Tommy Sands. Tommy Sands was one of the very first teenage idols. And I was working at the famous Garden of Allah in Hollywood with a little jazz group. I had just come down from Lake Tahoe, where we had been playing up at Harrah's before it was the major Harrah's. And one of these dem guys came into me and he said, "Hey kid, I'm looking for a drummer." I said, "Yeah, well what?" "Well, we got a guy that's on television. He's going to be a big star, and we need a drummer for an audition because they want to sign him at Capitol Records." So I said, "Well, what kind of music is it?" And he said, "Well, he's a kind of a rock country singer." And I said, "It's not really my thing. I'm kind of a big band jazz drummer, although I was working with a trio, Carol Simpson, a wonderful pianist." And the guy said, and I was probably earning $80-90 a week, working 5, 6, 7, even 7 nights a week at the Garden of Allah. And the guy said, "Well, this would be like a 10-minute audition for you." And, he said, "I'll give you $100 or something like that." And I said, "Where do I sign?" So I did. I met Tommy Sands. Well, it turned out, in the long run, Tommy Sands' father was my piano teacher in Chicago.
Perfect.
And his name, going back to the name thing now, their name was Sanchek. So Tommy had changed his name to Tommy Sands from Tommy Sanchek. And Tommy had been working in Houston as a disc jockey. And, of course, that led to the Sinatra family because Tommy married Nancy Sinatra. They had a Hollywood marriage for 10 minutes. And then the work with Tommy led to me being part of the Sinatra family, obviously. And who knew that someday I'd be doing all of Nancy's records. I was 33 years with Nancy, with her boots.
Yeah,
And which was a song that we did, of course, with Nancy. And, of course, I worked with that led to everybody in Hollywood because it was the very beginnings of that dirty word rock and roll. Nobody wanted to play rock and roll. Now, I had friends like Shelly Manne and some of the great studio musicians who just, they weren't going to play any of that garbage. Mm-hmm. They were 3-chord changes, just the simplest infantile music. And I said, I don't care, I started doing demos, and we used to do demos, two songs for $35.
Wow.
And these songs would go to Nat Cole, Andy Williams, all the stars of the day, including the Sinatras. And they loved what we were doing on these songs. And, who are these guys?
Where did you guys record that stuff? The demos and that kind of thing? Did you have to go down to a street corner in Hollywood somewhere, a studio?
Not a street corner, but we did a lot of that stuff at Gold Star Studios in Hollywood, the corner of Santa Monica and Vine. Unfortunately, it burned down. But anyway, we had so much basic training going on. We were learning as we were doing. And these drummers, I know that Shelly Manne was a dear friend, and we lost him too early in life. He was a great drummer. He was with Stan Kenton and a lot of the great West Coast jazz people. And when I think of those guys, Shelly would call me and say, what is it you're doing on records that everybody's talking Hal Blaine? I said, Shelly, it's just a backbeat on 2 and 4. That's all it is, the simplest thing you ever played in your life. And pretty soon these drummers who actually, they were envious, of course.
Sure.
I went from making 2 for $35 a day once in a while, not all the time.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I'm making $1,000 a day in the studios. Well, the studios that's the highest you could go as far as, earning. And the prestige was just the finest. I had one of the first charge accounts at the drum shop that you talked about a minute ago. That also led to Phil Spector, who, by the way, ties right into what you were saying before. Phil Spector rarely left under $500 tip. He was
very generous, man.
Very munificent.
Very, very generous.
Sorry, I just had to throw that back.
Exactly. That word that you coined.
Munificent. Now, I wanted to say, so these were songs that people were playing. There were 3 or 4 couple of chords. They were just very easy to play, but you and numerous other studio musicians at the time somehow got into a groove where you were able to make them sound uniquely different. Now, we thought it was the musicians like the Monkees or the Beach Boys or whoever was in the background, Sonny and Cher. We thought it was them that was making themselves sound so unique, but you found a way to make each of those unique.
When we went in, I would listen to a song, whether it was the Beach Boys or John Williams, the great conductor. All of a sudden, this little drummer from Holyoke, Mass. was doing these magnificent things. And these people had no idea that we could even read music, because that's how I came up with the name The Wrecking Crew.
Well,
and,
I think what's interesting, too, you mentioned The Wrecking Crew. So The Wrecking Crew might be a new terminology. When I saw that movie, The Wrecking Crew, a couple of years ago, someone said, hey, come see this movie at the Camelot. I had absolutely no background in understanding that there was this group of people that that kind of moved in and out of the studios in the 60s and into the 70s that were laying down the sound for whoever it was of the day, whether it was Neil Diamond, anybody that happened to come in, and that was what you did.
I had worked for Walt Disney as an actor, and I considered him a friend, obviously, and we got a call to do a movie at Disney Studios on the music stage. And it was we're coming in after about a 60, 70-piece orchestra who are being let go for lunch. Mm-hmm. And we've got our little 6, 7, 8 of us. And we're going to be doing, and the conductor was talking down to us. And he was saying, we had you folks come in because we're going to use some of your music in this movie. There's a little scene about a car and a craziness, and we need some of your rock and roll music. And now in front of you, you'll find a big piece of music. It's just a guide.
You don't have to use it.
So you can just...
I'm picturing The Love Bug. Was that the
Exactly.
movie?
Yeah.
The Love Bug, maybe? Was that the movie that you guys were...
It was called
Herbie the Love Bug.
Yeah, Herbie the
Oh,
Love
that's
Bug
it.
with Dean
Yeah.
Jones.
That's what it
Yeah,
was.
okay.
That's what it was. And so we're listening, it was myself, Glenn Campbell, Leon Russell.
Come on.
This was our little crew.
Yeah, this is a little crew.
The little crew.
Well, but I'm just saying, Lyle Ritz was on playing. Ray Pullman was always on Fender bass. And we were all doing major sessions every day with either 100-piece orchestras down to trios, or just a singer. And the composer had no idea.
I had no idea.
So he was talking to us about it, and he said, and we're going to make this song. We got 2 hours. Normally it's a 1 hour for lunch for this big orchestra. But for us, we're going to we got 2 hours. You can slowly memorize the song and on, and we're saying, yes, sir, okay, sure. And we're in Levi's and T-shirts.
Right.
And all these people are I used to call them the Blue Blazers, because all the violinists, they're all classically trained people. I could tell you some classical stories, but anyway, I won't go into that now. Anyway, and we're saying, okay, and he's saying, now what we do here in the movies is we have what we call a click track. Now, we've been playing with click tracks, for a couple of years now. And we're saying, yes, sir, And he's saying, don't let it frighten you. It's just a little click in your ear. And it's just to kind of guide you from the beginning of your music to the end of the music. It's all synchronized, so it works out, et cetera, et cetera. And we say, sure, okay, fine. And he tells the lady on the click track machine to slow it way, way down slow so that we can all study and listen and memorize, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, then as soon as we hear click, click, as soon as we hear 5, 6, 7, 8, we're playing. Well, she hit the proper click. It wasn't the slow click, and we played it perfectly.
Right in time.
And
Wow.
the guy went, oh, my God, I can't believe what you did. It was perfect. I wish we'd have made that. It was a rehearsal. And he said, how in the world did you guys do that?
This concludes part 1 of our interview with legendary drummer Hal Blaine. Tune in next week at this same time to hear part 2. And until then, I'm Chris May. Have a great week.